All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're looking at integrity and self-discovery, but with a unique twist, the infinity principle.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
We'll be drawing all of this from the Declaration of Interdependence. That's the book by Terry Sanders and Steele.
Okay.
We're focusing on chapter 3 specifically. But don't worry, this isn't just a boring book report or anything.
Uh-huh.
We're going to unpack how aligning your inner and outer worlds can lead to a more fulfilling life.
Okay.
You might even start to see things like fractals in a whole new light. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. This chapter really connects integrity to personal growth and even the harmony of society as a whole, which is fascinating because we usually just think about integrity as, an ethical concept.
Right, exactly.
It's not just about being a good person. It digs into how living with integrity can actually transform us from the inside out.
The book starts by defining integrity in a pretty straightforward way, staying true to your moral principles, even when things get tough. But then it goes beyond that, right?
It does. The authors are very clear that integrity isn't just words. It's about action.
Yeah.
It's about really weaving honesty, reliability, accountability, and respect into everything we do.
They have this really interesting example. Imagine you're working on a project and you run into a problem.
Right.
Someone with integrity, they might have to change their approach, but they would never sacrifice honesty or the quality of their work, right? Have you ever been in that kind of situation?
Well, definitely. We've all had those moments where sticking to our principles means taking a harder path. That's what the book is arguing, that integrity is about finding that balance between staying true to yourself and, navigating the realities of the situation.
Now, here's where things get a little mind-bending. They introduce something called the infinity principle.
Okay.
And it's an equation. Self equals selfless divided by selfish. And I gotta admit, the first time I saw that, I was totally lost. How can doing things for others actually increase your sense of self?
It is kind of a paradox, isn't it? The idea is that the more selfless actions you take, especially those benefiting everyone, the more your sense of self actually expands.
Okay.
And then, of course, the opposite is true, too. Focusing only on yourself actually shrinks your sense of self.
I think I'm starting to get, it's like by focusing on other people, you step outside of your own bubble.
Exactly.
You connect to something much larger than yourself.
Yeah.
That can be pretty profound, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It really broadens your perspective.
Yeah.
Helps you see your place in this interconnected world.
Yeah.
It pushes you to think beyond your own wants and consider the needs of, well, everyone and the world as a whole.
So how does this integrity thing, how does it actually play out in everyday life?
Right.
I mean, we aren't facing huge ethical dilemmas on a daily basis, are we?
Well, the book gives some practical examples of what integrity looks like.
Okay.
It all comes back to that foundation of honesty, reliability, accountability, and respect.
Those are like the cornerstones, right?
They are the building blocks for an integrated life.
Yeah.
So let's think about honesty in relationships.
Okay.
It's not just about telling the truth. It's about being really authentic and transparent with the people in your life.
Yeah.
Being willing to have those tough conversations, but doing it with kindness and respect.
It makes me wonder, how often do we avoid difficult conversations just to avoid conflict? But maybe, like you said, leaning into honesty, even when it's hard, that might be the key to building stronger, more genuine connections.
I think you're right. Integrity in relationships, it requires admitting when you're wrong. It means taking responsibility for your actions and building that trust by being someone others can rely on.
Reliability, that's another big one they talk about.
It is.
It's about showing up for people, both literally and figuratively. Keeping promises, following through, being dependable.
Yeah,
It's funny how good it feels when you have people in your life you can really count on.
it is.
But do we ever stop and ask ourselves, am I that person for others?
That's a really good question to think about.
Yeah.
That feeling of security and trust, it comes from knowing that someone is consistently reliable. They do what they say they'll do, and they're there when you need them, no question.
It boils down to being a person of your word, doesn't it? And that consistency really makes a difference in how people see us.
Absolutely. And how they feel about interacting with us.
Then there's accountability. That one can be tough because it means owning up to mistakes, even when it's uncomfortable.
It does.
Taking responsibility, even when you wish you'd made a different choice.
Right.
But it's not about beating yourself up, is it?
No, it's about acknowledging where you went wrong, learning from it, and making amends if you need to. It's about moving forward with more self-awareness and a commitment to doing better.
So growth, not punishment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that growth, as uncomfortable as it might be, actually strengthens your integrity.
It shows you're committed to doing the right thing.
Right. Even when you make mistakes. And then there's respect. The book argues that respect is about seeing the worth in everyone, no matter their background or their beliefs.
It makes me think about how divided things are today. It's easy to think that people who see things differently are, I don't know, less deserving of respect.
It's a dangerous way of thinking. But the book really stresses that respect is about recognizing that every person has inherent worth. It's about treating everyone with dignity and kindness, even when you disagree.
I'm trying to picture that in a real-world scenario.
Yeah.
How do you bridge that gap and approach disagreements with respect when everything feels so polarized? Is that even possible?
The book seems to say it is.
Yeah.
It's about going into those conversations understanding that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity.
Okay.
It's about listening, truly trying to understand their point of view, and finding common ground whenever you can.
So it's not about compromising your values, but recognizing that their values are just as important to them.
Exactly. And that recognition is so important for building a world where we can coexist peacefully, even with our differences. Remember, integrity isn't just personal, it has this ripple effect.
Right.
It impacts our communities and society as a whole.
This reminds me of that project example.
Yeah.
Integrity isn't about being rigid.
Right.
Life is messy, things change, and integrity is about adapting to those changes while staying true to yourself.
That's a great point. Adaptability is key for navigating life's complexities without sacrificing your integrity. It's about that balance.
Yeah.
Staying grounded in your principles, but responding effectively to whatever comes up.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of what integrity is. We've talked about this infinity principle, which is pretty intriguing. Where do we go from here?
This is where the connection between our inner world and outer world comes in. And this is where things get really interesting.